Welcome to the deep dive. If you're joining us, chances are you're facing or maybe thinking about one of the biggest shifts life can throw at you. Moving from a long-term marriage back to being single, especially, after 50, it's like rewriting your entire life story. And honestly, the sheer amount of stuff involved, emotional, financial, family, hardening, it can feel overwhelming. Information paralysis is real. So our mission today is to, well, cut through some of that noise. We've dug into a lot of detailed source material about this exact transition, and we've pulled out what looks like a really solid four-part framework. Think of it as a kind of roadmap that people seem to use successfully to rebuild after a long partnership ends. We're not just listing things. We want to dive into the actual actionable bits inside each part.
Yeah, and it's really important for you, the listener, to get this from the start. This isn't just one single change. It's truly multidimensional. People often get stuck on, say, the legal side or just moving out, but the research we looked at suggests that real recovery, the kind that lasts, it only seems to happen when you tackle four specific areas, kind of all at once. These four pillars, they really define where the hard work is, but also where the real chances for empowerment are. If you only focus on one piece, like maybe the finances, well, the emotional side might just fall apart later.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's unpack this framework. And I guess we have to start where all big changes really begin, which is inside, right? So the first crucial element, the foundation for everything else, is healing and self-discovery. Now, I know that sounds a bit self-helpy, like something off a poster, but what do the sources actually mean by reclaiming identity? It sounds big.
It is big. And what the framework suggests is that this goes way deeper than just, feeling sad or managing grief, though that's part of it, of course. They really detail the need to fully engage with that grieving process, yes. But the key takeaway we found is that recovery here is both emotional and, this is critical, spiritual.
Spiritual. Okay, how are they defining that? Because, for some people that word immediately brings up organized religion, which might not resonate with everyone's journey.
That's a really fair point. And it's a distinction the material seems careful to make. When they say spiritual, the roadmap isn't talking about religion necessarily. It's more about the fundamental act of reconnecting with your own core values, your sense of self-worth, the you that might have gotten buried under the role of spouse or partner for maybe decades. It's kind of like rewriting your personal mission statement, figuring out who you are now.
That sounds intense, but necessary, I imagine. Is there a specific technique or maybe a concept the sources point to help achieve that internal clarity? Something concrete?
Absolutely. Actually, one of the most insightful nuggets we found was something they call the 180-degree self-audit. It's interesting. The idea is after years of making decisions together, a lot of people lose track of what they truly wanted versus what the relationship needed or what their partner wanted. So this audit encourages you to literally list major life decisions, career stuff, where you lived, even vacations, and ask yourself, was the driving force behind that 100% me, 100% my spouse, or shared? It forces this kind of objective look back to separate the identities and hopefully reveal the genuine self that's maybe been waiting underneath all along.
Huh. A 180-degree self-audit. I can see how that would force some honesty.
Exactly. And the focus throughout this whole first pillar is clearly on learning how to thrive again, emotionally and, yes, spiritually, not just sort of getting by after the separation.
Yeah.
The specific outcomes are really pushing for are self-validation. Accepting the good and the bad of the past and then building that core clarity and confidence. You need that for everything that comes next.
Okay, so that really sets the stage. If you've started that hard internal work, finding your footing again, that newfound confidence is probably immediately put to the test, especially if there are kids involved. Which brings us to the next big, often anxious-making part, parenting through transition.
Right. This is where that internal shift meets the external reality. And the sources definitely acknowledge this is often where people feel immense guilt, that feeling like, I failed my children by breaking up the family unit as they knew it. So the guidance here seems really focused on managing the impact and trying to create stability for the kids amidst the chaos.
Stability and continuity. Okay, but what does that actually look like day to day? Especially if the parents aren't exactly seeing eye to eye anymore, communication can break down completely.
Yeah, and the material gets pretty practical here. It offers advice on navigating the actual mechanics of co-parenting. The ideal scenario, obviously, is what they call cooperative parenting. That's where parents can communicate reasonably well, discuss schedules, make decisions together amicably. But let's be honest, the sources are realistic. For those high-conflict situations, which, frankly, often lead to divorce later in life anyway, they strongly suggest looking at a parallel parenting model instead.
Parallel parenting. Okay, I've heard that term, but what's the actual distinction? How does that work?
The main difference is that parallel parenting really emphasizes structure and minimizing direct interaction between the parents. It's basically a strategy for stability when cooperation isn't happening. So instead of trying to hash things out face-to-face or on the phone and risking arguments, you rely much more heavily on, say, written agreements, maybe court orders if necessary, or even specific co-parenting apps for communication. The whole goal is to create two separate, stable home environments for the children, where they aren't constantly exposed to the conflict between the parents. The research highlighted in the sources suggests that minimizing that exposure to conflict is actually way more important for a child's long-term adjustment than trying to force some kind of parental friendliness that just isn't genuine.
That makes a lot of sense. Less conflict is key.
Exactly. If you think about the bigger picture, the goal is to transition from being, well, a broken couple to becoming an effective management team for the kids' well-being. Managing co-parenting well, even if it's parallel, helps ensure that the divorce, well, obviously disruptive, doesn't completely shatter the kid's sense of security. It's about modeling resilience and predictability, even if that predictability means separate, calm homes.
I like that the framework acknowledges the struggle but gives practical tools. Knowing about parallel parenting as a valid option, not just a failure of cooperative parenting, seems really helpful. Okay, so internal work started, parenting strategy in place. Now let's tackle the one that probably keeps a lot of people staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., the financial reset. For someone over 50, this isn't just about making a budget. It often taps into deep anxieties about independence, retirement, just the future.
Oh, absolutely. And the core message in this pillar seems to be that financial autonomy, your own financial stability, is just non-negotiable for your future well-being. It has to be a priority. So this whole section is dedicated to really practical, tactical strategies. Things like handling the immediate post-divorce finances, figuring out how to secure retirement assets that were once shared, and actively planning for a truly independent financial life moving forward.
Okay, the financial reset sounds positive, but let's be critical for a second. Don't the sources acknowledge the tough reality? For many people over 50, especially if one partner earned less or took time out for family, you simply can't magically recover decades of potentially lost retirement savings or career momentum. Is it really a reset or more like damage control and making the best of a potentially reduced situation?
That's a crucial point, and yes, the roadmap absolutely demands that critical engagement. It's not really promising a magic wand to restore everything to how it might have been. It's more about eliminating uncertainty and fiercely protecting what you do have and what you are entitled to. For instance, one striking, very practical piece of advice is about legal protection during the process. The research really hammers home the absolute necessity of updating things like beneficiary designations on insurance policies and retirement accounts before the divorce is final. Forgetting that step can lead to massive legal headaches and delays, maybe even probate issues down the road.
Ah, the small print that turns out to be not so small.
Exactly. And another key thing, especially for anyone who had shared retirement plans, like 401ks or pensions, is the critical importance of getting a qualified domestic relations order, usually called a QDRO. This is a specific type of court order. You absolutely need it to legally divide qualified retirement plan assets without triggering immediate and often hefty tax penalties or withdrawal fees. Without a properly drafted and executed QDRO, those retirement assets often simply cannot be transferred according to the divorce settlement. Basically makes that part of the agreement useless.
Wow, okay, a QDR. That's definitely one of those specific nuggets people need to know about or at least know to ask their lawyer about. So beyond securing the assets you have, what about setting up for the new independent life?
It stays very practical. For someone over 50, thinking about retirement and financial independence shifts dramatically. It goes from being maybe a shared assumption with a partner to an individual strategic necessity. You are the CEO of You, Inc. now. This means doing things like proactively separating credit profiles, which sounds basic, but many couples haven't had separate credit identities since they first got married decades ago. It means establishing new lines of credit in your own name, taking full ownership of all bills and financial communications. It's a fundamental shift from relying on a joint structure to building confident individual solvency. You need to know everything stands.
Undeniably, yeah. This part provides those essential structural tools. You need that financial ground solid beneath your feet before you can really even think about, well, the next chapter emotionally. Which brings us to the final piece. The last, and maybe in some ways the most emotionally tricky chapter of this framework, dating over 50. I mean, if you've been out of the dating world for 20, 30, maybe more years, That requires a whole different kind of readiness than the financial or identity work.
It does. And it seems like the source material might have deliberately placed dating last in this four-part framework. Was there a specific reason for that sequencing, do you think, a psychological one?
Yes, absolutely. The sequencing seems very intentional. The argument presented is that truly successful, healthy dating at this stage relies almost entirely on having made progress in the first three pillars. You need some clarity on who you are now, pillar one, a reasonable degree of stability in your home and family life, pillar two, and a foundation of financial confidence, or at least clarity, pillar three. Without that groundwork, the risk is that you're dating from a place of needing validation or maybe even looking for someone to kind of rescue you financially or emotionally. And the sources suggest that almost always leads to disappointment or repeating old patterns.
Okay, that makes sense. Build the foundation first. So, what does this dating over 50 pillar focus on? Well, the roadmap seems to frame this section around having what they call honest conversations. First with yourself, and then eventually with potential partners. It tackles key topics like understanding vulnerability in a new context that's different now than when you were 25. Also, rebuilding confidence that might have taken a hit during the divorce. And, critically, navigating the completely changed landscape of modern dating, especially online dating. That's a big one.
Oh yeah, online dating, that's a whole world unto itself.
Definitely. And this raises that big question. How do you redefine love or partnership after maybe spending decades in one specific type of relationship? The sources seem to dive into the digital challenge quite a bit. They explain that getting good at online dating isn't really about being a tech whiz. It's more about understanding digital communication etiquette, how people talk online. It's also about managing expectations, learning how to handle disappointment or rejection gracefully, and figuring out how to present your authentic, newly rediscovered self effectively in a very condensed, often visual format.
And I imagine that confidence piece we talked about earlier is just essential here, right? Especially given the, let's be honest, often higher rejection rate that seems to come with online dating platforms.
Absolutely crucial. The focus shifts. You can't rely on the courtship rituals you knew maybe 30 years ago. You have to embrace these new systems, these new ways of connecting. But the key is doing that while holding on to your intrinsic confidence, that sense of self you've been working on. They also emphasize redefining intimacy. That might mean understanding and accepting that a new partner isn't supposed to be a carbon copy of your former spouse or fill that exact same role built over decades. It's about creating something new, something distinct. Recognizing, too, that what a person needs or wants emotionally over 50 is often quite different from what they needed in their 20s or 30s.
Yeah, the goals and needs definitely change. And the tone of this advice seems important too. You mentioned the sources aim to be empowering.
Yes, the material suggests that the guidance here really tries to balance acknowledging the struggles, the awkward dates, the ghosting, the communication mishaps, with highlighting the potential joys and victories too. The aim seems to be creating a sense of empowerment and safety as you decide if and how you want to explore new connections.
Okay, so let's pull this all together for everyone listening. We've basically walked through the four essential pillars from these sources for navigating this huge life transition. Healing and identity first, then parenting through transition, followed by the financial reset, and finally, dating over 50. The common thread, the big takeaway, unifying all this material seems to be that this journey isn't just about getting through the pain of the ending. It's really about moving past those struggles. It's about actively working towards creating joy again and defining for yourself what fulfillment actually looks like after the marriage is over.
Exactly. At its core, this whole four-part approach views the transition not just as some kind of painful ending, but really as a chance to be seen, to feel supported, and importantly, to be equipped with specific practical tools. Tools like understanding the QDRO process or knowing when parallel parenting might be the better option. It's about equipping you to embrace this new chapter with, hopefully, more confidence and clarity. The goal is stability first, definitely, but also aiming for joy down the road.
That's a great summary. Stability now, joy later. So that leaves us with just one final thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over on your own time. If reclaiming your identity, maybe using something like that 180-degree self-audit we talked about, is truly the foundation for this whole transition, what is one specific concrete step you could take, maybe even today? Perhaps it's changing one small, long-held routine that was tied to the old life, or starting one tiny new personal interest just for you. What's one step you can take to move from just understanding the grieving process to actively pursuing your own self-discovery? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the blueprint for rebuilding life after a long-term marriage. We'll see you next time.